Rich, thank you very much, and thank all of you for getting up early in the morning and coming here. It's a great pleasure to be with you. I was talking to somebody actually last night and asked what was I doing today, and I said I was coming to talk on this subject to you all and what we should be doing in case of another national emergency and health emergency and all of that. And she said, well, I don't know what to do. Would you tell me? Well, I said you have to come tomorrow morning. It's going to be a long day. But that, I guess, is what you all and we all have to do is get people like my friend to understand what happens and what she should do and what a normal person should do. Something's happening here. Am I? What? That's all right. What has to come down? Oh.
Sorry.
It's all right. I didn't mind what it was, whatever it was. So anyway, I'm delighted to be here with you today at Princeton University, the Policy Research Institute, because Policy Research Institute plays a very critical role in policy problems affecting New Jersey and, of course, this entire region. This institute brings together government officials, private sector leaders, and outside experts to work on these various problems. Now, no topic is more important than the one we're going to talk about this morning, emergency preparedness. What have we done? How are we protecting the people of New Jersey and the region? And what do we still have to do? I want to commend my good friend Rich Kean for the superb program that he's put together. I was reading it, this great group of people and outstanding panelists. And I would like to acknowledge them all. I won't do that, but to say I'm very impressed with all of them, and in particular, of course, the first panel, with our Director of New Jersey's Office of Homeland Security, our Director of Emergency Management and Security from the Port Authority, and Steve Cooper in the private sector, but he did very important work as the Chief Information Officer at the Department of Homeland Security. So I want to thank you all and all the panelists who took the time to be here today. They'll speak in detail about the challenges facing New Jersey and facing the region. I want to address in my remarks some of the national challenges. As a country, we've made a lot of progress since 9/11. You all know that. But where do we need now to focus our attention? I think that has to begin with a word about the nature of the threat. Now, let's talk for a minute about intent. There's no secret about the intent of al-Qaeda. They've stated very plainly and continue to state they want to kill Americans anywhere in the world. It doesn't matter if Americans are in the military or the private sector or just simply citizens or tourists. They want to kill Americans, and they want to kill as many of us as they can, wherever they can. And they want to produce mass casualties. That's their MO. They want to produce mass casualties. Now, what about their capabilities to do that? Well, al-Qaeda is not out of business by any means, but it is showing signs of stress. It has suffered setbacks, and in many cases, because of its brutal methods have turned people off. It's weakened, but it's certainly not dead. It is still the single most dangerous terrorist organization in the world, and the one we must concentrate on. Its leadership, it's about everything we've done, remains intact, and all we know is somewhere along that border between Pakistan and Afghanistan, that's where we believe that they are. In terms of consequences, of course, they visited on us just 7 years ago the most devastating attack ever perpetrated on the American homeland. Now, they've also attempted a number of other things. They've attempted in 2008-06 to blow up multiple airliners over the Atlantic, and it still looks to identify and to perpetuate whatever horrible tragedies that they can inflict on us and on the world. So they have intent, they have capability, and the consequences consequences of anything they might do should argue against any complacency that we or anybody else in this country might feel. We need to respond robustly to protect our homeland and concentrate on emergency preparedness and response. Now, as to where we are today, you can use all kinds of standards, anything you want to use, except I guess, number one is we haven't been attacked on our homeland in the last 7 years. So far, so good. In the 7 years since 9/11, there's not been a successful attack, and it's no small accomplishment. After 9/11, most people, I guess, assumed within the next few years there would probably be another attack. I know I did. People asked me, and I said, yeah, I think in the next 4 or 5 years there'll be an attack somewhere in the United States. Well, there hasn't been. And it's no small accomplishment. And I think we have to thank a number of people in the administration, local level, people who worked very, very hard to prevent that from happening. Hundreds of thousands of intelligence, military, and law enforcement officers, Customs and Border Protection people, Transportation and Security Administration inspectors, federal air marshals, state and local officials, and so many others who've been working in this field. All of them, by their work, have helped to prevent another attack. And we've also gone on the offensive. Most of those involved in 9/11 attacks have been killed or they've been captured. The United States has played better defense too. If you look at airline passenger screening, it's better. The visa process, inspection at ports and of entry, all of those are much better than they were in the days of 9/11. The American public too has been engaged. It was, after all, it was an airline stewardess who happened to be alert, who looked down and saw that bomber starting to light his shoe. And that continues to be our best defense, as long as we keep an alert American public. And maybe luck has played a role too, because we know the terrorists still want to kill us, because our defenses still are not as good as they should be, because the number of terrorist incidents around the world continues to increase year after year, because plots in Madrid and London and Mumbai have succeeded, and several in Europe have come very, very close to success. Because we know there have been attacks against American embassies, consulates, and other miscellaneous other installations overseas. And because the forces that are still there in this world to create terrorism, whether it be repression, poverty, hopelessness, unresolved conflicts in the Middle East, all those things continue. And none of those things are any better than they were 7 years ago at the time of 9/11. So when we wrote our report, what we said as a commission was, look, we are safer, but we are still not safe. And that is what I tell you this morning. We are safer, but we are still not safe. Let's look at the very first initiative we took after 9/11, and that was to create the Department of Homeland Security. Its mission is simply to protect the American people. And it's done a great deal in just a few years of its existence. And I want to thank publicly here my good friend from New Jersey, from Somerset County, Michael Chertoff, because there are a number of accomplishments, and he should be proud of what he was able to do. First, we have a better system to identify and to stop dangerous people arriving at our borders or arriving at ports of entry. Second, we have a better system of securing our borders, fencing, new technology, and larger border patrols. We have a better system in place for the allocation of Homeland Security grant funding, basing most of our money now, finally, where the most risks are. For a long time we didn't do that. We also virtually 100% inspection of cargo for radioactive materials, and that's a big step forward. We have strengthened our aviation security system, over 20 layers of security, from hardened cockpits, doors, cockpit doors, to more air marshals and to better baggage screening. We have national chemical safety standards. We have made progress on cooperation between the federal government and the private sector on emergency preparedness. Since 85% of our infrastructure, by the way, is not in the public sector, it's in the private sector, that cooperation is very, very important. Later today, I know we're going to learn exactly how much progress has been made in New Jersey and the region on that particular question, and how much remains to do. We have made progress on all hazards emergency response and preparedness. A national incident management system is in place. Metropolitan areas have an integrated system in place for dealing with all elements of emergency prevention, protection, and of course response. The key, though, to continuing such a system is planning and training and exercising. And those steps have to continue to be done, across the board. And the forces have to be united in a joint way. I think we've made a very good start. But it is a start. And the requirements for training and exercise is going to be constant. All right, these are the kind of things we've done. What do we still need to do? What are our challenges? Well, there are many challenges ahead. The Department of Homeland Security is, after all, still a work in progress. It's an amalgam. Remember, we put together all these different existing agencies, 22 agencies, 1 million employees, and stuck them all together: Customs and Border Protection, Coast Guard, FEMA, Immigration Enforcement, Transportation Security Administration, Secret Service, Citizenship and Immigration Services. We put them all together and tried to get them to fit. It's been said that the DHS may be described as a confederation of 22 warring tribes. I think that's a little bit harsh, but it's not yet a unified and really effective agency. The new Secretary of Homeland Security, former Arizona Governor Janet Napolitano, has several very, very important issues on her plate. First of all, cybersecurity. Our advanced technology, military and civilian computer system are, as we know, highly vulnerable to attack. As a consequence of a successful attack, the lights could go out, internet could go down, banks could close, airports, railways would have to shut down. Now, President Obama has noted that. In fact, in his campaign, he made clear that cybersecurity is a priority, and he's called for a national cyber advisor. Well, the head of cybersecurity at the Department of Homeland Security just resigned. And he resigned because he said he didn't have adequate resources, and therefore he couldn't do his work. So this is not one that we've figured out yet. We know the dangers, but we've still got an awful lot to do. What are going to be the plans? What are the costs if we really want to protect our computer network? What's the best way really to bring the private sector into this effort, as well as to protect our private sector network? That's one. Another, cargo security. 2 years ago, Congress set the goal of 100% screening of maritime cargo in foreign ports before it's loaded on ships bound for the United States. Now, that's the goal. Some people don't think it's a feasible goal. Is it? And how much is it going to cost if we really are going to achieve this? How long is it going to take? What about secure forms of identification? You see, when are we going to implement the national standards for identification documents? Despite the work of the last 4 years, the implementation of any federally mandated real ID driver's license program by the 50 states, it still hasn't happened. We're a long way away still from that, at least several years away. I hope not more than several years away. And we still have very dangerous borders, particularly, by the way, not the Mexican but the Canadian border, where so many different forms of identification are accepted. That I know, having talked to the people at Homeland Security, that's the border they worry about. And until we start moving a little better on some sort of identity form which is real and national and can be checked, then that will continue to be a real danger. Public health preparedness. We haven't done enough to prevent an attack by biological agents. Attacks using smallpox, anthrax, and other bioterrorism agents, that sort of scares us. If you talk to my friend over the phone, that's what scared her. In addition, we're not prepared to deal with pandemic flu or the health consequences of even natural disasters. Now, already Secretary Napolitano, in the first 2 days in the job, has called for an analysis of the department's ability to deal with what she called a healthcare surge. In other words, when an emergency strikes. Now, I know we're going to hear more about this in today's final panel, but this is something we've got to be continually working on. Down the street, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is funding some very important things with CDC in this area. Now, the DHS organization itself, the Department of Homeland Security. Now, how couldn't a new secretary turn all these 22 agencies into a unified department? How couldn't she achieve coherence? How couldn't she build a unity of effort in the department? That's so important. And this leads, by the way, to challenges across the whole level of governments. When we met our report after 9/11, people ask me, what was your most important recommendation? That's like choosing among your children. It's very, very difficult. But if you look at 9/11 itself and say, what was the biggest failure? That failure was probably information sharing. If you look and read our report and understand 9/11 and look at the various terrorists and the kind of things they did after they came into this country, many people feel that even if two agencies, the FBI and the CIA, had talked to each other, shared information at that point, that at least some of the hijackers would have been apprehended well before 9/11. So, in the famous expression, before 9/11, because of a lack of information sharing, we were never really able to connect the dots, which is the expression everybody used. Now, in response to our recommendations, Congress and the President created a Director of National Intelligence and a National Counterterrorism Center. And the explicit legislative requirement for both institutions is to improve information sharing. Well, they've done so. No question there is more information being shared among levels of the United States government. But information sharing is still a problem. There are still cultures in those various agencies which work against the kind of information sharing which we really need if we're going to protect ourselves as a nation. And there's also another place that's acute, and some of you know this. It's acute between the federal government and the state and local authorities. Now, I've heard complaints from people here in New Jersey that the federal government just doesn't share useful, real-time information with them. The information, they say, that comes to them is too general, and it's too late. The Department of Homeland Security has stumbled in its efforts to share domestic intelligence with state and local officials. It does not share information that the officials really need in a timely manner, and they tailor information for Washington, not necessarily for the states. Now, this is a persistent complaint, and I hear it all over the country, and you can't dismiss it. State and local officials sometimes have unrealistic expectations. I know that about what intelligence can be provided. They often undervalue open source information, and sometimes even undervalue what they themselves will learn in their local communities. but there are 900,000 people in state and local law enforcement. Now, they can make a huge contribution to our overall security, and my suspicion is if there's a terrorist out there, he or she is going to be identified at that level by one of those people before it's brought to the attention of the federal government. So the Department of Homeland Security has much work to do to harness the power of this army of law enforcement professionals. In her first day in office, Secretary Napolitano has issued an actions directive on intelligence sharing. She wants to assess the intelligence sharing efforts within DHS and try to eliminate any duplication of efforts. She wants to improve intelligence sharing by involving state and local partners in the formation of intelligence sharing policies and programs. But it's bigger. It's bigger than her department. It's bigger than just the Department of Homeland Security. It's as wide as the government itself. We had very important recommendations of information sharing. And there was a task force put forward, sponsored by the Markle Foundation, and a new report issued now by the Markle Foundation finds that our sense of urgency on information sharing has simply diminished in the last few years. Cultural and institutional obstacles to information sharing persist. Markle Foundation shows these obstacles slow the implementation of laws intended to facilitate the flow of information to all those who really need it. Policymakers need better information in order to make better decisions. I would urge you to look at that report. I share all the conclusions of the Markle Foundation. The President and the Congress need to provide sustained leadership and information sharing. They can't let down on that particular subject, not if we want to protect our country. Now, a central part of emergency preparedness and response is, of course, communication. On the morning of 9/11, public safety agencies had great difficulty communicating at the World Trade Center. Also, the same problems occurred at Pentagon and in Somerset County in Pennsylvania at the crash site. Those same problems existed at Katrina. There were lives lost at the time of Katrina because law enforcement and emergency preparedness people had trouble communicating with one another. For that reason, the 9/11 Commission recommended that Congress expedite for public safety purposes the allocation of a slice of the broadcast spectrum for emergency communications. See, those spectrums, those frequencies, able to get messages through concrete and steel walls without difficulty, have been held by TV stations. In 2005, Congress passed a law at our recommendation to allocate some of the spectrum for public safety purposes. Well, a date set for transfer to digital TV has slipped to July 2009. The real crime here is that there's no plan in place for public safety users. To me, it was sort of like a bait and switch took place. Last year, wireless service providers won bids on large chunks of the spectrum previously used by TV broadcasters. But the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, declined to accept a low bid that would have led to a private-public partnerships used for public safety purposes. The FCC has yet to decide when and how to reopen the bidding for a public safety broadcast network. And I think that we all need. I was talking the other day to Lee Hamilton, my vice chairman, and I at 9/11 Commission, and we're both deeply concerned that we can't have more than 7 years pass again without addressing this problem of sufficient broadcast spectrum for police, fire, and for emergency services. I want to mention one or two other things. We recommended 9/11 Commission that we had to have sophisticated tools to protect ourselves, but also we had to measure what these tools of information would cost us in terms of our civil liberties. The Patriot Act makes it easier for government agencies to collect intelligence on every one of us. They can target groups as well as individuals and launch investigations based on suspicion that a target is engaged in terrorism or perhaps in supporting terrorists. Now, what I worry about is I don't think the government now has in place sufficient protections on privacy or for the amount of personal information that they now get, collect, share, and store. I think we need new laws to protect how that private information is used. Now, we recommended a Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. Now, Congress created that board. Members were appointed, but nothing has ever happened. Congress didn't like the performance of the first board, and frankly, neither did I, so they created a new law in 2004 to strengthen, to establish the board as an independent agency, to require Senate confirmation of board members, to ensure political balance in the composition of the board, to grant the board subpoena power, and require reports twice a year on civil liberties to the United States Congress. Unfortunately, the Bush administration took a long time to renominate members to the board. And the Congress, they never got around to confirming them. So the board now has no members. And yet the need for such a board, I think, has never been greater. We're building a surveillance society with massive databases, and all those databases contain personal information. And it's without our consent, and in most cases, I suspect, without even our awareness. The government argues that collecting such information is necessary to protect us. But this is how governments throughout history have justified getting more and more power into their own hands. This board, when it's created, is going to be the only office within the executive branch to look across the government at the actions we're taking to protect ourselves and bring to our attention anything that seems to be violating our privacy protections or our civil liberties. President Obama and the Congress should be working now to expeditiously to nominate and confirm new members of this board. You know, we need a strong government. We all understand that in this age of terror. But we also need a strong voice within the executive branch on behalf of privacy, on behalf of civil liberties, because these two things, if we're going to be successful, have got to be balanced. Let me mention Congress for just a second. Congress was very anxious and willing to reform the executive branch. They were not so willing to reform themselves. The current system of Congress and oversight of intelligence is balkanized and overlapping. It's very difficult for these agencies to carry out their missions to protect us when they must report to all sorts of different committees with different priorities and different guidance. You see, without effective oversight, with the fact these intelligence agencies have got to report in secret, how are we going to ever find out, unless Congress is doing its job, whether or not these agencies are really doing their job? Now, 9/11 Commission recommendations have made no headway, or very little headway, on congressional reform. We have to really do something in that area. Currently, we've got the Senate's Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. It's weak. There's no jurisdiction over numerous Homeland Security matters. For instance, that committee has no say over aviation security, rail and transit security, Coast Guard activities, or even port security. Now, this contrasts with the Appropriations Committee, where there's a single subcommittee for all Department of Homeland Security components on both House and Senate side. When we talked to the Homeland Security Department, and they were fairly new at this point, we said, tell us about Congress. And we found out that the Homeland Security, or the Department of Homeland Security, reported to 88 different congressional committees. Now think about that. 88 different congressional committees. Secretary Chertoff told me they spend a third of their time, he and his deputies, preparing to testify at these various committees and testifying before them. It's no oversight at all. Well, now you've had, at the time we made our report, it was 88 committees. Now it's 5 years later. It's now 86 committees. Congress is just very, very reluctant to make that reform, and yet we all know you've got to have decent oversight by one or two or three or four, maybe even committees, if it's going to be effective. So this has got to be changed. Secretary Napolitano has got to move on this, I believe, with the Obama administration, insists Congress create a single principal point of oversight and review for her Department of Homeland Security so she can carry out her responsibilities effectively and not spend one-third of her time testifying or preparing testimony before congressional committees. Until then, Congress is hurting, not helping, on the issue of Homeland Security. Let me take one moment on the question of intelligence oversight. Speaker Pelosi created an intelligence oversight panel and a Defense Appropriations Committee, and that's chaired by our own congressman here from Princeton, Rush Holt. Now, I've talked with Rush, and I believe that his panel, in particular in Congress, has done a good job reviewing the intelligence community budget. 2 years ago, the Congress decided to declassify the top line of the intelligence budget. For the record, that figure was $47.5 billion. I was told if I used that figure during our deliberation of the 9/11 Commission, I was breaking the law. My response, of course, was, who's going to arrest me? But it was ridiculous. Now we can do that, and that's important. To declassify the intelligence budget makes it possible for the creation of separate appropriations panels so that Congress can more efficiently do intelligence oversight. The House and Senate should now create such panels. And the rationalization for all this is very simple. It's a golden rule in Congress. They call it a golden rule. It's he who has the gold rules. And what that means, and some of you have been active in Washington one way or another know this, if somebody has your appropriation and you're in a federal department, you pay attention to them and you care about them and you make sure they have the information they need and whatever they need. If you're like the Senate panel on intelligence today, good senators, they don't have the budget oversight. So they get, Jay Rockefeller told me the other day, they don't get the information they need half the time. They get stiffed because they don't have the appropriations oversight. They should have the appropriations oversight. It should be in one place so that intelligence agencies don't have to pay attention to Congress when they try to do their oversight. Let me summarize just a couple of the thoughts this morning. As we review the record on Homeland Security and emergency preparedness in the 7.5 years since we had our attacks, and nearly 5 years since our commission made our report, we've made progress. There's many good laws in the books, many actions have been taken, many thousands of people in New Jersey and in the region are working to keep us safe. And public opinion, these polls, public opinion feels we're safer. Yet the public also understands that the terrorist threat is still real. The public also understands that disasters, man-made or natural, can strike at any time at all. The emergency preparedness agenda before us is far from complete. There's so much we have to do to keep our families and our state and our country safe and secure. We were talking the other day in Washington to a group of Homeland Security experts, and they had one big worry, and that is before 9/11, we were caught so totally by surprise, and everybody was complacent as to what might happen. And these experts, as they sat around talking to me, had one worry, and that is, again, we're starting to become complacent. Again, as where our priorities, that this is becoming lower, not higher in the priority chain. And that can't happen if we're going to keep our country safe and secure. Fortunately, we're working on it. And you're working on it right here. We have a set of outstanding speakers here today, standing panelists. They're going to help guide us to the challenges ahead. I know that'll be helpful. I want to thank Rich. I thank all of you again. I look forward to a marvelous forum. And I look forward, by the way, to any questions that you have of me. Thank you very much.
your hand will bring you the light, because this is being broadcast.
There's somebody way back.
Hi, my name is Kerry Baines. As the leader of an administration that is credited with the most effective use of mass media, how can the government best utilize mass media to respond to the next national disaster? And I ask because the landscape of mass communication is changing at exponential rates, and a static defense system cannot suppress a dynamic threat.
That's a good question. How do we use mass media to, and I think you're talking about not to prepare for an attack, but to respond to an attack, right? Yeah. It's, as far as mass media goes, I think you use what you have. I mean, you know that if provided, of course, that the radio and televisions are operating as they should, that's our best communication tool for the public as a whole. But you never know when something goes down. I mean, for instance, on 9/11, I was president of Drew University in Madison. And when the attack happened, I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know whether there was going to be other attacks. We didn't know whether our children's parents had been involved in the World Trade Center. And so I tried to get a message out to everybody on campus. Well, the phones didn't work. Cell phones didn't work. We had to use very old-fashioned methods. We had to send runners to each of the residence halls with the messages and to try and gather everybody together. So modern communications sometimes can break down. But I think you have to use what you have. I mean, people are instructed to turn on their radios and televisions if they think there's a problem. And there's an emergency broadcast network which is supposed to be operative, and that's how I think we will get to most people with instructions.
I'm giving a seminar this afternoon on the saga of anthrax. Unfortunately, it competes with the session here this afternoon. But my question, based on that presentation, is the release of anthrax spores in the United States came from a United States laboratory that seems fairly well established. And so the question is, what can be done to try to keep this kind of event from taking place from United States laboratories? What can be done without the kinds of things you have railed against, that is, destruction of civil liberties, destruction of science? What can be done to deal with that, even though that is really a primary threat in biological weapons?
What can be done to contain some of the very dangerous things that exist in our laboratories, right? That's the question, basically. Well, some things are being tried and are in effect now. I mean, for instance, when I was president of Drew University after 9/11, we had to let people know some of the things that were existing on that campus that the students were working with in their experiments in the laboratory. We had to register those things. People had to know that those things were in the library, and people had to contain and know that those materials stayed where they were during those experiments. So there are laws in place to try and keep and contain the most virulent things in laboratories. Now, when you figure high schools, colleges, science laboratories all over the place, it becomes enormously difficult. And that's why I say that I don't think we have a handle yet on the kind of things we really have to be done. Have we registered all the agents which could be used in a bioterrorist attack? I doubt it. I just don't think we're there yet. I mean, we're doing some things, and I haven't got in my head all the things, but I do know you have to register things and contain things if you're doing scientific experiments with things that could be used in a bioterrorist attack. But I suspect there may be some people out here who know more about this subject than I do, who may be scientists and understand what has to be done in laboratories. But I mean, I don't think we're there yet. I think we have to, as far as Amtrak goes, you know, I commuted for a year and a half on Amtrak and a 9/11 commission. I'd stay in Washington. I commuted back and forth, and I used to run into, by the way, I used to run into Vice President Biden on the train. We used to ride down together. And some of the things are a little bit silly. I mean, they announced on Amtrak, you may be the one picked to have your ID checked, so you should have a picture ID with you. I never saw anybody come through and check anybody's ID. I don't think that announcement does a great deal, unless they're really going to check IDs. So I think some of these things are a little bit silly.
Good morning, Governor.
Good morning.
One of the issues that was a problem in Katrina and other natural disasters we had was the need to move large numbers of people quickly. Did the Commission look at some of those issues in terms of what happens here in the Northeast Corridor? Because we're very dependent on certain roads, and if they're bottled up, thousands of people are handicapped in terms of movement from one place to another.
Yeah, the 9/11 Commission did not look at that because it wasn't within our congressional mandate, frankly. Our mandate was to tell the story of 9/11, how it happened, why it happened, its history, how the United States government failed over and over and over again to do what to protect ourselves from those 19 people who came into the country. That was our first mandate. The second was to make recommendations how a 9/11 attack could be prevented in the future. So we didn't get into that particularly. I recognize the problem of transportation, particularly here in the Northeast. I remember even little things as governor. I remember when a hurricane is moving up the coast, how fast can we evacuate the barrier islands? Even here in the Northeast. It would be a nightmare trying to get people out of New York City over those bridges and tunnels. So I know all that true, but it was not something that we dealt with in 9/11 Commission because it was not within our congressional mandate.
One final question.
Good morning, Governor. You made an opening comment about we are safer today, but we're still not safe. How do you gauge success in emergency preparedness, and what's the best measures or metrics that we can use to gauge success?
Well, what are the best metrics we could use? Well, the easiest metric to use is, have we prevented attacks? And the trouble is, we often prepare for the last problem rather than look ahead. We said the United States government had a failure of imagination in preparing for 9/11. What we meant was that as far as airlines go, the attacks in the past have been a bomb generally planted in the hold. So when the 19 hijackers were getting on the planes, they looked at their luggage, if they had luggage. And if their luggage was clear, they let them on the plane. Because we thought that if they weren't putting a bomb, we were prepared for the usual form of hijacking. So the instructions, if you remember, if you were a pilot or if you were a passenger, is if somebody hijacks a plane, sit there quietly, don't resist, and the plane will probably be flown to Havana, Cuba, and you'll be released, and a day later you'll be flown home. That was hijacking. And so you prepared for the bomb in the cargo hold, because that had happened before. You prepared for the hijacking, because that had happened before. Nobody, except a couple of science fiction writers who did envision it, prepared for the fact that somebody might actually do a suicide hijacking on a plane and fly the plane into a building. Nobody. Nobody envisioned that. Nobody prepared for it. Wasn't the CIA, wasn't anybody in government. Nobody was ready for it. So I think, you've got to use imagination. I suggested, not wholly facetiously at one point, that maybe some of those science fiction writers should be at resident in the basement of the White House throwing up ideas of what could happen and how you prepared for it. Because we have to have imagination as to what can happen. There are any number of scenarios. I mean, we talk about bioterrorism, we talk about cyber terrorism. I didn't mention here what I think is not the most likely, but the most terrifying thing to me, which is somebody smuggling in a nuclear device into one of our cities. We've got to prepare for how these things might be done and imagine what they might be. Imagine the mind of a terrorist. People are bright, and these people want to kill us. So they're thinking of different ways that they might be able to do it. We've got to think ahead of them. and get ahead of them, prepare for whatever the scenario might be, and that's difficult. But that's the only way I know how to do it. You can't prepare for yesterday, what happened before. Al-Qaeda never strikes twice in the same way. If they want to hurt us this time, they'll try to do it in a different way, and the only thing we know is they'll try to kill as many people as possible. That's their only form that they always use. Okay, thank you very much.